Hi, Geography. How you doing? I have a tag along who wants to come hang out with you. Hey, check it out. Check it out. If you ever watch Lord of the Rings, look, it's the Eye of Sauron. Watch this. Hey, hey, no, don't fight. Don't fight it, Stevie. Just brace it. Look, look. Yes, yes. It's Sauron. He's watching you. Oh, she loves me so much. Oh, okay, there you go. Go away. Okay, back to geography. Miss you guys. Hope you're doing well. Man, it is this year, man. It's crazy. This is the last week of April. We're going to be hitting May actually on Friday, and then there's only a few weeks, and we're done with the year. So let's just keep going and let's finish strong. We're talking about Eastern Europe now. We finished Western Europe. Good job to you guys. So let's go ahead and just move on to the next part of the continent of Europe. So here's all the many objectives. You'll see them at the top of the screen as we go. Read chapter 12 by May 6th. Just get it done. It's not too bad of a chapter. There's a lot of weird looking, kind of foreign sounding names, but we'll make sense of that as we go. So Eastern Europe is what we're talking about. So let's go ahead and jump in. Eastern Europe is called a shatter belt. Imagine for a moment if you had a, I don't have a good example in here, but I have my Caribou coffee because I drink coffee incessantly. But imagine if it was a glass bottle, right? And I just shut it down, boom, and it's shattered. And there's glass everywhere. That's what shatter, shatter just connotes that harshness and that abrasive sound. But Eastern Europe is called a shatter belt, and here's why. It's constant changing borders, changing leadership, fighting, et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at a lot of maps, like the United States is actually pretty stable. Like Massachusetts hasn't changed much for a long time, right? Maine, the borders have been pretty steady. Nevada, California, you name it. When these nations were established, you look at the U.S. map, it's pretty static. You get to Eastern Europe, every 5 years, every 5-10 years, you'll see pretty big differences because it's constantly changing, and people still are debating over who owns what in that whole area of the world. So it's a shatter belt, meaning constant tension and constant changing leadership. In fact, I don't want to go too deep into this because we'll talk about this in other classes, but World War I, when that happened in 1914 to 1918, about the dates of World War I, in that early 20th century context, you had the Balkans, which is a big part of Eastern Europe we're going to look at. You had all these nations there that were getting really power hungry, that thought they were the best. That's nationalism. My nation's way better than yours. Your nation's awful. My nation's great. And what happened, you had a lot of nations that were starting to grow into that. And that resulted, that's why people called it the powder keg of World War I. Like you had all these nations that were just ready to fight. They just needed an excuse. Kind of like how a powder keg just needs a little spark to blow up. Well, all they needed was a little excuse, which they would get in 1914 with the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. But again, that's for a later time. But Eastern Europe is where the conflict really started. So just keep that in mind for the future. There's a movement called Pan-Slavism, which basically there's the Slavic peoples are the people who make up Russia and a lot of Eastern Europe, and they were a big part of the problem here because they wanted to have a unified Slavic, almost like a unified Russia, just think of it like that. Unified Slavic peoples coming together and creating a powerful nation. And that's ultimately what led to World War I happening, as we'll see when we get to that class. Okay, Eastern Europe, let's talk about how we can divide it up. So here's a map of Eastern Europe. And we're real zoomed in, so let's just give you some perspective. Western Europe is over here. Here's Germany, remember Austria. Like those are some of the Western European nations. And then Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. The UK is over here as an island. Well, this is Russia over here, right? East of Eastern Europe is Russia. So let's talk about this. You have the Baltic subregion, which is going to be up bordering the Baltic Sea up here. Then you have the Carpathians. This is the Carpathian Mountains right here. And you're going to have a few nations that are in this mountainy kind of area. Then you have the Balkans Peninsula right here. Greece is the southern tip of the Balkans, but that's considered Western Europe because of their culture and whatnot. But this is the Balkans Peninsula. It goes out into the Mediterranean Sea. And you have the Western Balkans over here. And you have the Eastern Balkans over here. And lastly, you have the Eastern Plains, which are going to be these nations up here that border Russia. So this week we're going to talk about the Baltic and Carpathian subregions. Next week we'll talk about the Western and Eastern Balkans and the Eastern Plains. There's a lot of nations, but we're going to go through it kind of quickly and characterize it as a whole the best we can. Okay. And one more thing I should mention, an important geographic feature is don't even worry about the northern plain. That's kind of pointless. But I want to talk about the European plain. This is all really good farmland. It's flat. Think about plains. Like you go out to Kansas, how flat it is. Well, you have a lot of flat plainy land in this whole region, and so lots of good places to grow. In fact, Western Russia has some of the best soil in the world. So why they were starving when they were communist, what I should say, when they were strongly communist at the USSR, should go to show something about the problems of communism when you have some of the best soil in the world and your people are starving to death. So anyways, but that is the great European plan. Okay, so let's talk about the Baltic region first. Again, there's 5 regions, right, sub-regions of Eastern Europe. And we're going to start with number 1, which is the Baltic region. And this basically is this area right here bordering the Baltic Sea, hence Baltic region. I should mention that this is a tricky thing that people always mess up. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, that's these nations right here, and Poland are technically considered the Baltic region. But only Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, that's Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, only these 3 are considered Baltic states. So make sure you know that difference. It's really important. I should mention Russia invested after World War II ended in 1945. And again, I hate throwing these things out there because we haven't gone through World War II. This is something frustrating about doing geography before we do history. But World War II was a huge, massive war between, you probably heard, I know you've all heard of it, but basically you had Germany, Italy, and Japan essentially on one side, and you had the United States, Russia, Britain on the other side, and there were several other nations involved, I know, but just look at the main players for a second. And you had these nations fight it out. It was a massive, huge war. And what ends up happening is after the war ends in 1945, Russia takes control of a lot of Eastern Europe, right? They want to have their influence on that part of the world, whereas America, which is the other really powerful nation after the war ends, wants to have control too, and they but they work a lot with Western Europe, and there's a competing influence battle, right? Russia wants the world to be communist, America wants the world to be democratic and capitalist. So that characterizes basically 1945 up until especially it really comes to a head in the 1980s, as we'll see. But anyways, for a long time though, you have Russia and United States fighting over influence. Eastern Europe is much more Russian influenced. So that's why we're talking about Russia investing in the infrastructure. That's the roads, right? The networking of these Baltic states. And after Soviet rule ended, they retained a lot of what Russia had invested in, which was kind of a good thing. Okay, you're probably wondering, okay, Trev, you or Mr. Cartwright, you went through all these nations, but I saw another nation right here. What's this little spot, right? What is that, a nation? Is that a Baltic state? Well, that's the Kaliningrad Oblast. That's Russian land. So it's part of Russia, technically. It's just separated. And when the Nazis were defeated in 1945, Germany was defeated in 1945, Russia took control of that land. To this day, it is their land. So it's kind of an odd thing that when you look at a map, it'll say Russia as a tiny little nation, then you'll see Russia as a huge nation. So that's technically Russian land that they own, though. The Kaliningrad Oblast. But hold on a second. Wait, Kaliningrad? I think Mr. Callan has some explaining to do. He might be a Russian spy. Comrade Ben Dunn, I know that you know a little bit about the Soviets, so maybe you guys are working together. I don't know. I think if you're in Greek, you should ask Callan about his tie-ins with Russia. Maybe get to the bottom of some things. Let me know what you find out. Okay, so again, like you said, the Baltic region is Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. But the Baltic states do not include Poland. So you have Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. These 3 nations right here. And you have their capitals mentioned on this map. You have Tallinn, you have, for Estonia, you have Riga for Latvia, and you have Vilnius for, did I get that right? Yeah, Vilnius, I'm sorry, for Lithuania. Vilnius, sorry. So those are the 3 capitals of the Baltic states. Let's go down here. We're going to spend a little bit of time on Poland just because it's going to help you when you get to World War II. What is going on here? What is going on? I don't want this stuff to happen. Leave me alone, iTunes. Okay, this is important stuff for when we get to World War II. So, Warsaw in Poland, that's the largest city in Poland. It lies on the Vistula River. Then you have, so over here you have Warsaw, see that? Then you have Gdansk, which was formerly Danzig. That's Poland's largest port, which is up here, Gdansk. And you have Krakow, which is the 3rd largest city in Poland. And it's kind of hard to see, but it's right down here in the southern part. So 3 really key cities in Poland. And it is important to know that there was a union that was formed called Solidarity that shipbuilders formed in Gdansk. And that's something that all the history books are going to mention, but this isn't a Polish history course. We're just trying to have an overview. But just so you can be... Hey, I don't know why it's doing this on... My iTunes is frustrating me. Because I tried charging my phone, now it's trying to back everything up. Okay, anyways, but Gdansk, that's where this thing happened. So you know where it's at on the map if you want to do some further studies on Poland. But one thing we have to talk about Poland is It's Austria, it's Auschwitz in Polish, if I said that right, but we all know it as Auschwitz. Auschwitz was the largest Nazi death camp. And you see Auschwitz is down here, right? It has the Polish name in parentheses. But in World War II, what happened was Germany, the Nazis, they were basically killing off races that they felt to be inferior, primarily the Jews. So what happened was this was the largest death camp where they killed over 2.5 million Jews and Polish people. It's a very sad story. People would go there and they would be forced to do labor for as long as they could. And if they didn't die doing that, they would probably just be thrown in basically an execution chamber. What they would do is they'd say, hey, we're all going to throw you in here to take a shower, and then they would not turn on water, they'd turn on poison gas, and they would kill everybody with gas, and then they would burn the bodies. So again, horrible, sad, dark mark on human history, but this is southern part of Europe, so you can go to the visitor center today if you want to learn more about that. Okay, we're going to go through this really quick, but there's a few regions of Poland I want to mention. You have the Central Plains. Again, here's Poland on the map, you see. You have a plainy kind of area here. It's good for growing, lots of water and whatnot. Gdansk is located up here, the port city again. Lech Walesa brought an end to communist rule in the 1980s. He was from this area, and it's good to know about him because, again, a lot of these nations, they were controlled by Russia, right, after World War II, and a lot of them wanted their independence after they realized that they don't like communism. So in the 1980s especially, you have this growing revolt in the eastern part of Europe where they push back and they get their independence from Russia. And Lech Walesa is a key figure in Poland becoming independent of Russia. The southern uplands, again, this is Poland up here on the map, and you see this region right here, it's called the southern uplands. You have Galicia and you have Silesia, two regions of the area, and down here in this map you can kind of see the difference here between the two regions. Again, just kind of an important thing to know about Poland, like it's divided into plains, and you have the southern parts called the southern uplands there. Okay, the Baltic States. A little bit about these. So again, we talked about these before. Estonia is the northernmost Baltic state. The language is Estonian, which is actually a Finnish language. So it's interesting that Estonians can understand Finnish people. And as a reminder, Finland is in Scandinavia, which is north of this area. You have Norway, Sweden, Finland, right? And so Finland is the easternmost Scandinavian state, and they can communicate with Estonia because they're actually pretty close to each other. The capital, again, is Tallinn of Estonia. Latvia is the middle Baltic state. The capital is Riga. Nearly 1 in 3 live in the capital. They love their capital, and it's huge. So, good thing to know. And then you have the Baltic states. And Lithuania is the largest of the Baltic states. It's home to what's called the Hill of the Crosses. And it's a really crazy, I don't know how many crosses are on this hill. I mean, it's probably changed since this video was even released, but tons and tons of crosses. I'm not going to play this video because last time I tried playing it, it messed up my whole slideshow and I had to start all over, but maybe I'll put it on required viewing because I want you guys to see what it looks like. But Vilnius is the capital of Lithuania. Okay, so let's go on to, that's the first sub-region again. So that's the Baltic region, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, but the 3 Baltic states are Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Okay, so let's move on to the Carpathian region here. So first of all, here's the Carpathian Mountains. Again, we're in Eastern Europe, right? This area right here. So you have the Carpathian Mountains over here, and you have the Great Hungarian Plain south of the mountains. And so these are 2 key regions that you need to know geographically. And again, over in Western Europe over here, here's the Alps. Remember we talked about in the Apennines in Italy? So the mountain range sort of turns into the Carpathian Mountains over here. And then we'll learn about the Dinaric Alps later. But for now, Carpathian Mountains and the Great Hungarian Plain are 2 geographic features you want to know. Another picture of the plain there. Skip that for now. Okay, so about that, there's 3 countries that are considered Carpathian countries. So let's talk about those. So the Czech Republic, you can see it right here, south of Poland. And the Czech Republic's capital is Prague. And I want to mention one thing important, a cool fact about the Czech Republic, is that after the Communist Party took over, they didn't like it, and they fought and fought and fought. And finally in 1989, and by the way, 1989 is a really critical year for when the Russian influence finally started to die. But in 1989, the people had a peaceful, non-violent revolution. That's why it's called the Velvet Revolution, because velvet is soft, right? So it's like a soft revolution where people didn't go and take up arms, but they protested and protested, and they finally got their way, and they got independent of Russia. So it was a really key event in human history, especially in Czech history. But the Velvet Revolution was when they threw off their communist rule, and it was done peacefully. Slovakia, you can see that on the map too, is right next to the Czech Republic, a little bit eastward. The capital is Bratislava, And that's one of those nations that's been fought over a lot over the years, but currently it's Slovakia. We'll see how long that lasts. And then south of Slovakia, you have Hungary. And Hungary is interesting because descendants of the Magyar tribes from the east, so then over this area, came over and settled there. So there's a little bit different of an ethnicity there. The capital of Hungary is Budapest. And this is kind of interesting because what happened was you had two cities, Buda and Pest, and they were separated by the Danube River. And in 1872, the two cities said, why don't we just become one city, even though we're separated by the river? So they became one city, and they're called Budapest instead of Buda and Pest. Now they're Budapest. So there you go. By the way, and if you think it's weird for a city to be united, even though it's separated by a river, that's actually really common. London has the Thames running through it. Look at our city, Kansas City. We have the Missouri River runs through it, and yet you still have one city. So yeah, it's not a big deal. Okay, and then in the Czech Republic, you have three regions, Bohemia, the Sudetenland, and Moravia. And these are all really key things. You probably heard Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. The Sudetenland is an area right here. This was believe it or not, a huge, if you study World War II, this was part of the main problems that the war started. Hitler was not happy about land ownership of the Sudetenland. And that's something that contributed heavily to the Nazis invading and attacking all the countries around them. But we'll talk about that more later. Moravia produced some really good spiritual renewal movements. One of my heroes, John Wesley, I'm a Wesleyan in my theology, and he was highly influenced by Moravian Christians. So it's a lot of cool things in the Czech Republic that we could talk about. But for now, this so you can see a map. These are the three regions of the nation. Okay, and I have some stuff I'll just skip through. I'll think about putting that on required viewing. But for now, here's what I want you guys to do this week. Watch the lecture. And by the way, as a side note, I shouldn't type this up, but any required viewing, if you see a tab that says required viewing, make sure you watch those things because they're important. Watch CNN 10 and leave a comment. So that's really key, just make sure you're doing that every week. What discussion on the Baltic States, make sure you put your, make sure that you go through and read what it's asking for and leave a comment about the Baltic States. And if you watch this lecture, you'll know the difference between the Baltic States and the Baltic region. And then the map activity, chapter 12, activity 1, make sure that you go through and complete the map this week. So that's it, just starting out with Eastern Europe. I hope that this all makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.